Welcome to Crossroads. Mask mandates are making a comeback. Folks, the requirements for people to wear face masks are being rolled out in parts of San Francisco. That's going to be starting on November 1st. And they're set to last until March of next year. Now, to be clear, this is not all the U.S., this is not all of San Francisco even, but they're coming back. The Epoch Times says this. They say with orders which were handed down by individual counties, meaning it's not technically the state, it's not from the federal level, it's the individual counties in that area. And notes that these apply mainly to healthcare workers, although at least 2 Bay Area counties have extended the requirement to visitors and patients. So if you want to go to the hospital in 2 areas, you have to wear a face mask. Now notes that health officials in counties who have issued upcoming mask mandates say that the face coverings are designed to reduce the spread of COVID-19, influenza, and other respiratory viruses, harking back to the COVID-19 pandemic when mandates were widespread across much of the United States. Now, to be clear, because I'm a journalist here, it does not seem, if you read the packages on many face masks, they will tell you that they cannot actually protect you against those types of viruses because the particles are smaller than the fabric of the face masks. But they say that in the announcements, although the packages of the face masks many times will not say that. Now, note, this will be implemented not everywhere in California or even everywhere, even in the Bay Area, at least for now. A notice on this from Alameda County, which includes Oakland, it notes the mandate will apply to healthcare workers and that any violation of this mandate, if you violate it, meaning if you don't wear a face mask, they say that that act, quote, constitutes an imminent threat and menace to public health, constitutes a public nuisance, and is punishable by fine, imprisonment, or both. They can throw you in jail, throw you in prison, if you do not wear a face mask in some of these areas. Now, there are similar health orders coming out from Contra Costa County, Napa County, Santa Clara County. It does not appear any other counties in other parts of the United States are issuing face masks. This is only in California, in just some of the areas there. Again, we'll see how things go with this going forward. We do know that, it's election season, and we do know how that happened last time. That being said, of course, we'll find out if these things get implemented more broadly. A lot of that's going to come from, FDA and whether they end up mandating it or saying that there's a health crisis. Some of it's going to come from the federal level if there are warnings. It might even come from the international level with the World Health Organization. If these international bodies or national bodies alert the public that there's a public health crisis, it'll be up to individual counties, maybe the federal level, but even individual counties on whether they want to follow this. But we can say for sure right now, this is beginning again, at least in these few areas. Now, like that said, in other news, in North Carolina, there are reports that FEMA workers in at least one part of the state have been warned to evacuate due to alleged threats against them. What they're saying basically is that FEMA workers are facing threats from some of the locals. And now a man has actually been arrested in North Carolina because he made some of these threats. Washington Post said this. They say threats against federal emergency response personnel have hampered relief work in parts of western North Carolina hard hit by Hurricane Helene, prompting disaster workers to relocate because of safety concerns and feeding a cycle of fear and anxiety. Meaning that in this area, very badly hit by disaster, some of the relief workers feel that they are in too much danger to help people who are in danger. Now, it notes that on Monday, the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office said in a statement that it had arrested William Jacob Parsons, 44, of Bostic, North Carolina, on charges of making threats against Federal Emergency Management Agency employees. It notes that FEMA and U.S. Forest Service personnel who had been working on recovery relocated, and at least some work in the county was paused. Meaning, again, in that very crucial time where within for 2 weeks of this disaster, They had to put that on pause because they believed they were being threatened by at least one of the locals. Now, notes that while officials had warned about the threat of truckloads of militia potentially targeting relief efforts, the sheriff's office did not find evidence for those claims. That was one of the previous ones. News was going around. You might have seen it in some of the different news outlets. They claimed that there were truckloads of militia in North Carolina, and they were threatening to kill FEMA workers. According to the sheriff's office, they, quote, did not find evidence for those claims, meaning it was rumors probably, or who knows. Maybe there's something to it, but they're saying they didn't find evidence of it. Now, notes that FEMA said it made operational changes over the weekend, quote, out of an abundance of caution based on threat information. In an email obtained by the Washington Post, a Forest Service official assisting in the Helene recovery response operations said that FEMA had advised agencies on the ground to relocate workers, noting that U.S. military personnel, quote, had come across truckloads of armed militia saying they were out hunting FEMA. Again, you know, you're in the first 2 weeks of a major disaster. I was on the ground there over the weekend and a bit before that. Again, most of the relief work is being carried out by the locals. Government's more handling things at the infrastructure level. But again, FEMA says that they're being threatened. And notes the threat turned out to be more limited than that initial report. And so they evacuated people, evacuated these relief workers based on a very limited threat. And notes that these FEMA officials and a local law enforcement, it says that the police apprehended the armed man who had threatened to go after its employees. So, you know, there was at least one credible threat, innocent till proven guilty. We'll see with it, right? And notes that while the initial report said there was a truckload of militia that was involved, again, the statement said, authorities said that they concluded that, quote, Parsons acted alone and there was no truckloads of militia going to Lake Lure. It did not happen. And notes that by Sunday afternoon, personnel were back in place. This was, again, just about a day that they stopped relief efforts. And notes the officials spoke on condition of anonymity. Now, look, based on the report, it seems that there was an initial concern, right? FEMA was back at work one day after they got the warning. It did not hamper it too much. Although, again, when there's a major disaster taking place, one day can be life or death for some people. I can tell you personally, again, I was there for 3 days reporting about. I did hear one story similar to this while I was there. It did seem isolated. I did talk to an individual. I was traveling with an individual for a bit. He said he had spoken to a few FEMA workers and they had been beaten up. The story was this: they were back in the haulers, which are kind of the more backwoods areas. Some people live there in that area, especially in Appalachia. They had gone into the haulers, and what FEMA and a lot of times is doing is they're kind of surveying the damage and seeing if people can become eligible for aid in the future, rebuilding or whatever else. A lot of people believe that FEMA's there to check their homes and then seize their property. That's one of the very common beliefs that I did come across. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying other sides are. I can't prove it either way, but that is one of the common beliefs there. And so for a lot of people, right, again, and FEMA would say they're absolutely not stealing people's land. A lot of people are looking at Hawaii and Lahaina, where people got $750 and very little help, and a lot of people are being forced to sell their properties. A lot of people are looking at Hawaii and saying that the same thing's happening in North Carolina. And so that's kind of the ground for that concern. They're also looking notably at some of the rare earth mineral operations there, and there's a very strong belief that there are plans to mine the mountains. And so a lot of people are very concerned that their houses or land might be taken or they'll be forced to sell because of this disaster. And so this is causing a lot of the tensions. I did talk to, again, an individual who had ran into some of these FEMA workers. Based on my contact with this individual, I believe it was credible. He said the FEMA workers told him that they had gone back into the haulers and they got beaten up by a few people, beaten up and then thrown in the back of a pickup truck and then taken down the mountain. Based on that, again, it would not personally surprise me if FEMA was having some threats there. because of some of those beliefs going around. But again, they did arrest one individual. I can say also, I did talk to many individuals. It seems that for the most part, because of the way the communities have come together there, the locals have been able to fulfill most of their needs on food and so on. And a lot of it's coming from outside donations. It's church groups, it's veterans, it's like, people who have different skill sets like chefs, even barbers, coming in and doing everything they can. And so the community has kind of had this rallying around, not just locally, but from abroad. And they built that within like a couple days. And so when a lot of the relief efforts came in, 5 days, even longer for some areas later, a lot of people already kind of had things set up for them. And so they didn't need it as much. Again, they need help, but a lot of it's coming from the grassroots. And so, imagine you're a guy, and I saw it with my own eyes, and you're eating like barbecue, brisket or something like that, because some folks brought out a big barbecue, and aid, government aid rolls up and they offer you a can of Spam. A lot of people would rather have the barbecue, and that's kind of how it's gone. That said, in other news, it appears the push for lab-grown meat, remember they were doing that in the Petri dishes and so on, that is coming to an end, unless they can bail it out. I'll be talking about this after I come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Well, folks, are you worried about lab-grown meat grown in Petri dishes? Well, it looks like that may be coming to an end. Right now, what's happening, the markets have had their say, really, and after a string of failures, it appears the push for lab-grown meat is coming to an end, at least for now. They might try to bail it out. The Telegraph UK said this. They say your tasty, wholesome steak is safe for now. The lab-grown meat revolution looks like it's over. And they said, quote, it's going to go down as one of the biggest failures in food history. Business schools will be presenting lessons on lab-grown meat. That's according to Gillian Mellington, a food consultant whose company has advised alternative protein companies, which could include that, and told them not to do it. But in what may be the most shameless pivot, it says, that a startup sector has ever made, and now wants you and me, the taxpayers, to bail them out for their own folly. And guess what they say? The government is sympathetic, meaning they might bail out lab-grown meat. It's a failing industry. It might get saved with your own tax dollars. They say this. Since the first lab-grown burger was demonstrated more than a decade ago, billions of pounds have been thrown at the technology. Again, this is in the UK, so they call them pounds, right? Meaning dollars. It notes that it involves extracting cells derived from animal fetuses and cultivating the cells of these animal fetuses in sterile bioreactors, a process that takes a lot of energy and expense. It's not easy to do, in other words. It notes the resulting slurry is then stretched and shaped to resemble animal tissue. Although the backers, who include Bill Gates and Richard Branson, understandably prefer the euphemism cultivated meat. They note that in reality, it never stood a chance. The economics were always stacked against meat bioreactors. The process requires pharmaceutical industry-level lab conditions, very expensive nutrients, which amount to about 2/3 of the cost, specialized labor, and long time scales. And they say optimistically, producers would be doing well to hit $63 per kilo wholesale as a break-even price. And they note as well, That made the output not remotely competitive with premium meat products. They note that one of these companies, Sci-Fi Foods, backed by the band Coldplay and Anderson Horowitz, closed down this year. Israel's Aleph Farms has laid off 30% of its staff. Upside Foods canceled its plans for its first production bioreactor, but they say the real reason is not so much economics as it is lack of demand. And I'd say demand ties into economics, and they say that's expressed in the form of public disgust. People were grossed out by it, and they didn't want it. Now, like, the issue is this. Even if the industry is bailed out, it may not help it because people may not want it. Again, consumer demand, not government bailouts, will decide whether it works out or not, because that's the way the free market works. Subsidies or not, no matter how much money you throw at it, you cannot force people to want something. And if they don't want it, they're not going to buy it, unless the government buys it for them using their tax dollars and maybe gives it to them, and even then they might not eat it, right? That's the problem they're having. And so, again, subsidy or not, no matter what they do, it doesn't matter as long as people don't want it. It's not going to succeed. That's just the way it works. As things currently stand, it seems similar actually to what was happening with Beyond Meat. You might have seen this, for example, at some of the chain stores. You might remember going to some of the fast food joints, and they had different options. You could get your beef burger, or you can get your bacon burger, and then they had the Beyond Burgers and things like this. The Beyond Burgers are different from veggie burgers. Any of you had veggie burgers in the past? They were kind of decent, right? They were like mushrooms and different types of like greens mixed together. They were okay, actually. Beyond Meat was different. Beyond Meat was like more of a lab type concoction. It was made to look and taste like meat, but it didn't quite look or taste like meat, and people tended to not want it because some word was getting around, and people said, oh, it has too much estrogen and it's not good for you, and frankly it's so processed that people who are more health minded didn't seem to want it either, right? Now, you can still find Beyond Meat for sale in some areas, but it did not get the reception that some thought it would. And a lot of the companies around that type of industry have been going out of business. I would actually say that you have the opposite happening. While they're pushing for all this alternative protein type stuff, whether it's meat or, again, Beyond Meat or bugs or Petri dish meat, people want just good old steak. People are going carnivore in some cases. They're going the total opposite direction. But again, there are issues, they're saying, with the meat supply. Part of it has to do with swine flu. Part of it has to do with avian flu. Part of it has to do with new government regulations on the meat processing facilities, which could see some of them maybe even shut down. And so, again, they are projecting the cost of meat will go higher because of these side issues. And so there are companies kind of getting on the bandwagon, believing they're going to fill the niche market. And it seems niche or not, people still want meat, and people would rather not buy these things, frankly. That said, folks, in other news, the Chinese Communist Party is now launching a military drill that takes the form of what we have been warning about. The communist regime, the CCP, is right now, militarily surrounding Taiwan. Epoch Times says this. They say the Chinese Communist Party's military launched its Joint Sword 2024B drills just 4 days after Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te said in his national address that Beijing has no right to represent Taiwan. Two countries, even though they don't want to say that, right? They note it is the fourth such drill in 2 years. The CCP's Eastern Theater Command stated that it was conducting the drills in the Taiwan Strait in, quote, areas to the north, south, and east of Taiwan. Again, everywhere except the west, where you have the deep water areas. Now, note that it did not specify how long the drills will last. Taiwan's defense ministry has condemned the Chinese military's actions as, quote, irrational and provocative, and say that it will deploy appropriate forces to respond to the drills and protect its sovereignty. Now, it notes the drills involve troops from the Chinese Army, Navy, and Air Force. The command said that Chinese ships and aircraft were approaching Taiwan in, quote, close proximity from different directions with focus on, quote, sea-air combat readiness patrols. This is important because the way modern warfare works, if a country were to invade another country with a surprise attack, what would you call it? Well, you're not going to say, hey, we're going to surprise attack you. You'd say, hey, we're launching a combat drill and we just need to move all of our military assets right along the borders of your country. That's what they'd say. Usually, combat drills where they move all their forces to a region that is in preparation for an actual invasion. They might not do it. Part of it may be just to mess with their heads or send a political message. But if they were to actually do it, it would look like this. Now look, it said the Chinese vessels and aircraft were also focused on blockading key ports and areas. And this is one of the key parts here. Again, I've been saying this for a few years now. Were the Chinese Communist Party to try to take Taiwan, what would it look like? Well, it would look like a castle siege. Taiwan, geographically, is like a bastion. It's like the way that it's situated, the mountains, the shallow waters to the north, the way that it's just kind of positioned. Taiwan would be very difficult for a country to invade, especially the Chinese Communist Party. Were they to invade it, Chinese ships, troop carriers or whatever else, would be facing fire ongoing as they cross the Taiwan Strait. Think of like, the invasion of Normandy times 100, because the range of the weapons would be significantly longer. The ability of them to actually raid the beach would be significantly more difficult, and weapon systems have become a lot more advanced. They would be getting attacked, sunk. The U.S. military would launch its Hellscape program, possibly, which would include various drones taking out all those troop carriers. It would be absolutely devastating for the Chinese military. Once they make land, once they reach land in Taiwan, then you're dealing with mountains and underground military bases and very difficult close quarters combat because of the cities. You'd have jungle warfare and things like this. And not to mention the fact that, again, they have military bases all through, again, underground in the mountains. Think of like Iwo Jima, again, times like 100. Not to mention, again, various hills which could work as military assets, which would be very, very difficult to take. That type of war for the Chinese Communist Party would be devastating. And so what are they doing? Rather than look at direct ground invasion, they're doing something else. They're looking to cut them off. Think of like in medieval ages where there's a castle, and if you directly attack the castle, you're going to lose a lot of men because you can't scale it in time. The archers will shoot you, they'll dump hot oil on you, and you're probably going to lose most of your military. So what do you do instead? You surround it, you cut it off, and you starve them out. You make it so they have disease, you make it so they run out of water, maybe you poison their water supply, and you do that to them until they can't take it anymore. That is the method the CCP appears to be preparing for Taiwan. And again, they can call it a policing operation, they can call it a joint military exercise, they can call it something else, but it can have the effect of cutting off Taiwan. And so when the Chinese Communist Party does things like this, where they actually enact it, but they don't do it in a way that actually constitutes military, an act of war per se, it does take the same form and has relatively the same effect. And so the CCP now in the open is basically saying they're doing this. Now notice they also practiced assaulting maritime and ground targets, as well as, quote, joint seizure of comprehensive superiority as part of the drills. Now on this note, it says, the United States has expressed serious concern over the CCP's military drills. The State Department said on October 13th that Beijing's actions, quote, could risk escalation and urged the CCP to, quote, act with restraint. Now, look, again, I've been saying this for years. This is the very likely form it would take. I've noted that were a war to take place between Taiwan and the Chinese Communist Party, you would probably have the castle siege taking place on one side. They'd surround Taiwan, cut off trade, maybe cut the internet cables, and isolate them. They would also very likely couple that with a color revolution, taking advantage of political divisions within Taiwan. And again, the CCP does those types of things very often through the United Front. They have assets, very broad, doing those types of operations, although Taiwan is one of the very few countries that has taken actions against the CCP's United Front networks. And so Taiwan does seem kind of privy to what the CCP does, and they're trying to stop it. Now, look, with that said, though, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te, he has vowed to protect his country against the Chinese Communist Party. So we'll see where it goes, and it does seem the U.S. is at least, although they don't want to say publicly they will defend Taiwan, at the very least they have said publicly they have military strategies in place for such a conflict where they would have the ability to defend Taiwan. On that note, Japan seems to be coming out like it would defend Taiwan, and Japan being part of the Quad Alliance, the United States, Australia, India, and again Japan. If Japan got pulled into it, it's possible other countries get pulled into it as well. Now look, this comes in context also of all the other military conflicts in the world taking place right now, including possible Israeli strikes on Iran. Now those strikes against Iran would allegedly be in retaliation to Iran's missile strikes on Israel. And with their operations now stretching into Lebanon and elsewhere, this could become a lot bigger. And with all this happening as well, the United States is now sending more troops to Israel. I'll be talking about this only on EpochTV.com. So for those of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, come and join us on EpochTV.com. Not only will you get access to the rest of my episode, you'll also get the live Q&A where I answer your questions. So click on the link in the description below. Come and join us in Epoch TV. And before we continue, let me show you a quick trailer for my documentary, The Final War, the 100-year plot to defeat America, which you can also watch on EpochTV.com. Now, with that said, I will see you for the rest of this episode in just a short moment.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.